What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Plain Jane Cars, and this is a Plain Jane Cars podcast. As you guys know, I always like to bring entertaining and guests with an extraordinarily interesting car background. And we have a guest like that today. Welcome, Jeff, to the show. Jeff, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you.
So Jeff I've been thinking about creating profiles. And I didn't tell Jeff about this. It's something I've been thinking. A YouTuber I watched years ago created hobbyist profiles. They had hobbyists that were kind of just around the edge of the hobby. They kind of had casual interest and then layers below that. And I think there's some hobbyists in car interest. You find guys that are tinkerers, right? They want to improve things. They want to modify and customize. Then you have collectors, people that just buy, hold, never drive, put a car cover on it and maybe bring it out to, Concours d'Elegance or something like that, right? And then you have guys that are flippers, I call them. They just flip in out of cars. They just love that experience of having the new car, keep it for a year and a half, boom, they're into something else new. And it's interesting. I find that you fit into all of those categories.
Probably a little bit of all of them, yeah.
I find that's rare because most people kind of stick to, I'm a little bit like that too. I've kind of been all over, like customizing. I like fast. I like aesthetics. I like holding on to valuable cars. Those are all things I'm interested in, but you have an interesting car story. Let's start at the beginning. What was your first car?
I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and my dad was a car guy whenever I was growing up, and he, Steelworker's kid. We had no real money whenever I was a kid growing up, and my dad.
We have that in common. I'm a Steelworker kid too.
My dad had this eclectic taste in cars, so he had things like a Sunbeam Alpine. So an early memory is the three of us sitting on the rear deck, the three boys.
That's right.
Going to church in the morning on a Sunday in a two-seater car, right?
Yeah.
And that Alpine's actually the first James Bond car. That's
the
first car that he ever drove in James Bond.
It is.
On Dr. No was a Sunbeam Alpine.
That's it. Yep.
And which later became the Tiger, much more powerful. But then he had a Renault Dauphine, and whenever we went and bought that,
wow,
you open up the hood or the trunk on it, and there's just grass underneath it. The engine's in the back seat, had a little 850 cc engine. Yeah. And my dad took that back, rebuilt the engine, installed it in the car, and we drove that Renault for a while. And then he followed that with a Renault R10 and a bunch of American cars. But he
this is in the 60s, right?
This is in the 60s, right.
There's not too many people buying French cars, right? Buying Renault. That had to be unique.
In Pittsburgh, it was the only one.
Had to be.
Yeah. Or Sunbeam for that matter.
Or Sunbeam, right? That's what I'm thinking. That is unique.
So just like kind of weird taste.
Yeah.
So then whenever I turned 16 years old, think about the times back then. I was making big money because I was getting $40 a shift working at a bakery. Wow. I worked 2 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And the guy gave me two $20 bills.
Wow.
So that's $5 an hour.
That's good money.
Whenever minimum wage was $2 an hour.
Yeah.
So I was making $40 on Saturdays, $40 on Sundays whenever I was in high school. So you could save up money fairly quick.
Sure.
And the cars that we were buying in 74 were 10-year-old cars. We were buying mid-60 cars. So my brother had a 69 Z28.
What?
My other brother had a 70 Roadrunner. I had a 67 Camaro was my first car. These cars were cheap back then.
Jeff, you got to be kidding me. What a lineup. So, could you recount those again? The three cars you got. So my brother, listen to this, guys. I'm going to put prices into what these cars are worth right now.
My brother had a 69 Z28 that he still has today.
69
my older
Z28.
Brother. And then my younger brother had a 70 Roadrunner, and I had a 67 Camaro with original paint, blue with the white hockey striping on it, stick. Just a really nice car. And then, but I paid $475 for it.
That's crazy.
$475, if you think about it, is literally 4 or 5 weekends of work.
Yeah.
And so
you could save that.
So
right?
whenever I was a senior in high school, I drove that car to school every day. And then I bought a Triumph TR3 whenever I was a senior.
Yeah.
And then
the
TR3 was awesome. My dad and I took the body off the frame, redid the frame, rebuilt the engine, put the body back on it, rebuilt the entire car. My dad just sold that car. My dad's 88. He probably sold the car 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And finally sold. I mean, he had it forever.
Yeah.
Just literally forever.
50 years almost, right? 40 years at
least. I was
least.
a charter member of the Western Pennsylvania Center of the Triumph Registry. Right?
Okay.
So the Triumph Club back
Yep.
then. And I've belonged to a bunch of different car clubs. But then I started autocrossing, and I autocrossed a 74 Fiat X19. So it's the old little Fiat with pop-up lights.
Yes.
So I would drive it to the autocross, race it, put on a helmet, race it, and then drive it home. And that was the cars we had back then. And I followed that with a Lancia, which a Lancia back in the 70s was way ahead of its time. It was front-wheel drive, dual overhead
cams, yep.
5-speed,
yep.
All the controls for the car on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
You know, so you rolled it to turn on the headlights. Nobody else, I'd let him sit in the car. Nobody could dream of figuring out how to turn.
Yeah, how do you turn the headlights on this thing? Where's the switch?
I had no idea.
That's funny.
And that just kept on evolving, and I bought a mid-year vet. I bought a C2 65 L79, two-top Milano Maroon Corvette convertible, and I had that for many years, and kept on buying and selling, all through my youth. But I was raising kids. I had 3 kids, and I didn't really have any money to speak of until I got to be, I had more disposable income in my 40s and 50s. So I bought about 25 cars in the first 25 years, and I've bought about 50 cars in the last 25 years.
Really?
So I went through that. I kind of made a list to prepare for this.
We have to go through your list. We definitely want to hear.
Hit all of them, but I've owned. I went to my Inozetek account, and I had 42 cars in the last 20 years.
Are you serious?
And those are the ones that I bought Inozeteks for, because I even had some cars that I didn't.
That you didn't even put.
Yeah,
it's like I didn't even register for Inozetek. That's pretty interesting.
But I love getting a car, getting it right, and then driving it. And then I get rid of it. It's kind of like you get a itch, you scratch it, and then you move on to something else.
I know the feeling.
And I've done that so many times. And I've actually bought cars that I've only put 1 tank of gas in them, and I've only kept them for a month or 2.
Jeff, are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Some things you just don't really like.
That's true.
And other things you just absolutely love.
That's the one thing I find is interesting, even from my perspective. I'm not nowhere near. I'm insane. I've probably, at 42 years old, I've probably owned 50 cars, which sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. Yeah, because it's like when you're into cars, it's kind of like it's just what you do. And you can spot a deal, you know what you like, but what happens over time is you start to find out more about yourself. You start to find yourself interested in stuff that you probably wasn't or weren't going to be 2 years ago or 3 years ago. So I bought cars just like, man, that'd be a good project car. And you pick it up, and then, I'll be honest, you start working. I was like, man, this is not really for me. Maybe it's a project for somebody else. You package it up and sell it and move on to the next thing.
But you learn something from every one of them.
100%. And you remember them. One thing I wish I was better at is keeping track of them, like taking pictures. Like I have a friend, Greg Carr. He's a collector too. We'll have him on the show. He's like you. He probably from 40 to 65. He's probably 65, 60 now. 50 or 60 cars. And he's a tinkerer, so he likes to just build them. And he kind of does 40%, 30% of the work himself. He will, kind of contract some of the work, like the paint and body, and sends them to auction and sells them. And he enjoys that getting it right phase. And then sell. That's what he enjoys, in his retirement. So anyway.
As you get older, though, I think whenever you're young, I didn't even have a mechanic. There was no mechanic until I was 30 years old. Everything, 100% of the car, anything we did on a car, we did. We would roll it up onto car ramps, lay underneath the car, change out the exhaust. Jack it up, change the brakes. We would put a starter on it, whatever it was. You knew how to points worked and ignitions and carburetors. Pull a carburetor, rebuild a carburetor, put it back on. You did all of that yourself. And now I've evolved to where I do very little work on cars. I do very, very little. So it's kind of the evolution of cars, and I think cars are so much more trouble-free than they used to be.
100%.
My Triumph, I absolutely worked on it more hours than I drove it.
You had to?
Yeah.
You had
to work on it for an hour and drive it for an hour.
Literally.
It's just the way it was.
My first car was, I'm a little bit old school. My dad is kind of similar background. He loved American cars, but we owned both. So we had American cars, but the cars that we customized and tinkered on were always imports. He loved Volkswagens, Porsches, things of that nature. So my first car naturally was a 73 Volkswagen Super Beetle. And we customized it. We did all kind of stuff, rebuilt the engine, made it bigger, made it faster. And one of the first things I did, my dad was good at dealing with points and setting dwell and all kind of stuff. So when I took that car, when he first gave it to me, there were an extra set of points in a feeler gauge in the glove box. You just had to have it because if your points went bad on it, had to have a little file in there to file it down and get them set in there. So I put an electronic ignition. That was the first thing I did. I was like, I can't deal with setting points on the side of the highway. I did that one time. It was a cold, wintry day on the side of the road on 695 in Maryland with cars flying by at 70 miles an hour. I'm tinkering in my distributor, getting the points set. I was like, I can't do this anymore. But I learned a lot. And you're right. The cars have evolved so much now. I have a Dodge Ram 2500, and I laughed. It's about a year ago. Somebody was saying something about changing the oil. I said, you know what? I've owned that truck for 2 years, and I don't think I've opened the hood.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. Like, I just, whereas before I was up to elbows in grease when I owned a car. Now I'm like, no, I take it to the dealership and they maintenance it and I move on.
When you get the oil change, they're putting a new windshield washer fluid and they're doing the checking the brake fluid and everything. There's no reason.
There's no reason.
Right.
And the intervals, the maintenance intervals have moved. Yeah. I mean, it's once a year now. When I first got my first German car, to BMW, I was shocked because I was, program of 3 months every 3,000 miles. You had to open the hood. Once a year, every 15,000 miles, you go see the people. They tax you, and you're done for the next year.
When I drove BMWs, I got to know my service advisor, his wife, his kids, of course, his cell phone, everything. It's just the way it works.
That's how it works.
Because those cars are. I love BMWs. They're wonderful when they're working right, but they're when they're not, rarely working perfect. There's always a little nagging. There's something on it. Right.
Yeah, I think they do that by design because a lot of car I know dealerships make their margin in the service.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in selling the car.
Right.
But the service, they make their margin. So let's talk about some of the memorable cars that you've had. And one of the things I want to ask you about too is it seems like you've had a huge history with domestic, like American cars, but also a huge history and lineage with imports. Which way do you lean or you right down the middle?
I think there's two different sides. I think that one side is the off-road stuff.
Okay.
And so I have I love to hunt and fish, and so I've probably owned 20 or so off-road vehicles in my life.
That's cool.
So things like Pathfinders, Forerunners, Jeeps, Scouts, bunch of pickup trucks.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of the off-road stuff. A Land Rover Sport.
Yes.
Air suspension.
Yes.
Phenomenal off-road. Just absolutely phenomenal. It would go places that people would just be amazed, the stuff that I could drive that Land Rover through.
Yep.
I had a 20 Defender, the new body-style Defender whenever they first came out, and you couldn't stick that car. And we're on 4,300 acres of swampland where we're hunting and fishing at on Spring Creek and the San Jacinto River coming out of Lake Conroe. So it's 6 miles long, a mile wide. It's all swamps, and so you learn what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, where to go and where not to go.
I've been stuck. I've called people. I've had a bunch of vehicles with winches. So that's kind of one class of cars. It's kind of the off-road, outdoors kind of cars, and then I've had a bunch of kind of sports cars. So things like C2 Corvettes and Fiat Spiders. I had 3 Fiat Spiders, the X19, Jaguar F-Type with a stick, an Audi R8 with a gated stick, and a couple of old Ferraris, like a Ferrari 348.
Yep.
With a gated stick.
Those gated manuals.
Ferrari 360 with a gated stick.
The Modena, yes.
And so just a bunch of different cars. And then I've had the kind of the mainstream luxury vehicles like a BMW 740 and 750, had two A8s and A7, some big Mercedes like an E450 convertible.
Yeah.
Mercedes SUVs and things like that. I had a Mercedes AMG GTS.
Love it.
With a Rentec chip in it.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a phenomenal car to drive.
It's a weapon.
I've always wanted to drive sticks.
Yeah.
You couldn't get a GTS in a stick, but I loved the car.
Yeah.
And whenever I took it out and put it in race and drive it kind of somewhere safe, but somewhere way faster than you should be driving.
Sure.
It was just stupid.
It's a weapon. It's literally a weapon.
So much fun, right? And so I never thought that I would have an automatic sports car that was that much fun as that AMG GTS. And I always say it's one of them that I sold too soon. I should have kept it for another couple of years.
So that was going to be my next question.
That I've sold too soon.
That's what I want to talk about, right? You named some pretty cool cars, especially when you talk about the gated manuals. I mean, all of them. The Scout. Those are things that just, as you were going through your list, that stuck up in my mind. Give me the top 3 that you said, man, I should have held on to. Because we know, and my listeners may not know this, naturally aspirated, gated manual, especially the European luxury brands, the resale on those are extreme right now because the manual is all but done for. And that gated, clicky, mechanical, like that true driving, raw driving experience, people are paying a premium for that now.
I remember going up, I drove up to Flower Mound outside of Dallas to buy this 348. And I got an unbelievably good deal on it. This guy was living in Denver. He had 2 348s for sale at his parents' house. And his parents were moving the day that I went up there.
Oh, yeah. So it's like, yeah, gotta go, right?
Leverage like you can't even imagine.
Like, I could buy it, but
literally, I was a cash buyer for the car.
Wow.
And probably got it for $15,000 under what it was worth back then. Because, and I had a choice of 2, and I picked the red one. But I vividly remember starting that car up and backing it out of the driveway and taking it on a 5-mile drive. And it felt like it should be illegal to drive it on the highway. It had such a visceral, clicking, mechanical go-kart feel to it, like no other car I've ever driven. And I think Ferrari does that in a phenomenal way.
They're probably the best at it.
Incredible.
They're probably the best at it.
Driving experience for a Ferrari is far superior to anything else I've ever rode in. And they do it, you know. You look at what Ferrari has out now. They might not have a manual transmission. They have a ton of really, really cool cars.
There's some cool cars out. That's one thing that they're good at. One thing I always say is they're driving. They don't always have the highest horsepower. They aren't going after the land speed, right? They're driver focused, right? And the collector focused, right? They know their audience and they cater. That's the one thing I like about the Ferrari brand and kind of dislike about the Ferrari brand, because they're like the Rolex of the car industry, in my opinion, right? Like, it's not like you can buy a bad one. Now, there's some ones that aren't as valuable as others, right? And some that are appreciated after, the production run has ended. But I think they're synonymous to me like the Rolex. Like, you really can't buy a bad one.
A 348 was an unloved car.
Yeah.
The people that had them loved
them.
They
loved them.
The 355 was a better evolution of it. The 360
The 360,
better.
Yep.
Now, talk about aspirational cars. When we talk about cars that you'd really like to have, I'd love to have a 430 gated.
Oh, the Scuderia. Oh,
the 430 is the last
that lineage,
true,
right? Yeah.
Mechanically driven Ferrari that you can buy. It's the last one.
I think it's the most beautiful right now too.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I think it's gorgeous. Like, it's aged like the 60s and 70s era Ferraris. So I don't think, the 80, like the Testarossa, I think we're starting to appreciate how it looks. Yeah. That 430 has always looked good, and it still looks modern, but still classic.
But they're north of 200K, and so if you bought one new in 07, 08, you actually never lost a nickel.
No, you never lost a dime. And
awesome.
Did you track resale on them, say pre-pandemic prices? Where were they trading at?
I think the lowest an F430 stick I ever saw sold for was maybe 120, something like that. That's about as low as it ever got. They always commanded a premium, right? Everybody knew that. I remember at the gym I go to in the Woodlands, a guy had a 550 6-speed for sale. I want to say...
The Maranello?
10 or 12 years. Yeah, 550
Maranello, right?
Maranello.
Yeah.
I want to say 10 or 12 years ago, he wanted $55,000 for it, which was a good deal, but it wasn't like a killer deal.
It wasn't killer,
It had 30 or 40,000 miles on it, but it was a stick. It had a couple of nicks and dings in it.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at it and thinking, I just can't see spending that much.
Spending $50,000 on that. Well,
and it's easily $100,000 now.
$100,000 car easily.
Right.
Easily.
And it's just because of the transmission. If you put the F1 in it, all of a sudden it's a $60,000 or $70,000.
No, you want the manual. That's the interesting
the V12 manual.
That's awesome. It. All of the V12 manuals, when you look at the Murcielagos now, all of those, I would say late 90s, early 2000s, right? Where you had some reliability, right? The cars.
Oh, much better.
Much better reliability. But they still had the mechanical experience, right? So you had the manual with it. You had the V12. It's somewhat reliable. You can still get parts from them. They're skyrocketing in value. I mean, skyrocketing.
The 360, you could do a full cam belt service on it by taking the panel out behind the seats and working on the car with the engine in.
So it wasn't an engine out? Because that's the joke, right? All of them, take the whole engine out.
Take the engine out, put it on a stand just to change the belts.
You need an oil change, take the engine out.
$8,000 service is not unusual in a car like that. And
that sounds insane.
Which is one of the problems with it. Whenever you get cars that are kind of at the bottom of the depreciation curve, the people that can afford them may not be able to afford the maintenance on them that's required. And it doesn't take long to turn it into a paperweight in your garage, because that's what it turns into.
Yeah, you can't drive.
And a lot of these cars you see are barn find cars today. They're 30 years, 40 years in a barn. It's exactly what happened to it. It had some relatively minor problem 30 years ago that the guy couldn't get the car started, figure it out, and it's sitting in the garage.
I call it some things. People ask me about certain cars to buy. I don't know why, because I'm probably a bad person to seek advice for them, because I'm going to say buy it. But I always tell people, look at cost of ownership. Look at true, and you can kind of, there's categories for cost of ownership. Depreciation is the first one I tell them to throw out, right? If it's not like going to be an investment grade car or something like that. But that is a cost of ownership. But maintenance, all that kind of stuff. And look at what the cash cost is. Insurance, fuel. It's humongous, especially if you go with a mainstream or you go with like a Haggerty where you're going over, agreed upon value, things of that nature. So, yeah, one of the things I will say to avoid having a paperweight in your garage is look at annual cost of ownership and be honest with yourselves. Can I really afford? Because some of these cars, I think people are getting smarter. The consumer's getting smarter. Bring up watches again. People want to buy something because they see that there's a chance of it being an investment, a chance of it appreciating. But the issue you can run into is just what you said. It's expensive to own them, right? Even if the entry point, buying it, is achievable, maintaining it may not be for you.
And if you look at the cars over time, because I've been doing this long enough that I've seen them over time, the cars that were aspirational to my dad.
Sure.
So he wanted things like Auburns and Cords and Duesenbergs, right? He wanted the pre-war Packards. Those were just out of touch. Yeah. The old Cadillac V12s.
Yes.
The Woodies from the 50s.
Yes.
But think about that today. Those cars have absolutely peaked and are going down.
Sure.
And then the folks that are my age, mid-60s, 70s, 75 years old, the cars that we loved growing up are no longer aspirational cars to the 40-year-olds today. So you can go out and buy a C2 Corvette that would have been $100,000 10 years ago for $80,000 all day. And there's less and less people that are looking to buy a 65 Corvette.
That audience is shrinking.
Right?
When I really started...
The new car is... What do they want? They want the cars that they had, that they lusted after over when they were 20. So a Toyota Supra Turbo.
There you go.
Cars, the Japanese cars. They call it the
R34s. Yes.
And so I was always a big fan of German and Italian cars, but the younger collectors probably prefer the Japanese cars.
The JDM stuff.
Cars that I might never have even heard of. Are crazy.
I'm sure you've heard of them. But yeah, you look at the R34 GTR, and that's my generation, right? I've talked to my friends all the time. It's our poster cars, right? My dad had me in the cars at a very young age, and I remember specifically so I want to talk about your Barrett Jackson and your Meekum. I mean, you're definitely an auction guy, so we want to get into that. But me and my dad used to watch it on TV. We never went. And about 25 years ago, there was this Mopar craze. I remember watching personally the Roadrunner. Let's just use that for instance. You could probably, when I first started watching it in the early 2000s, late 90s, you can get one for $45,000 maybe, 37, and nice too. Frame off, resto, numbers matching, was it 396, whatever the big engine is,
the big
440, I'm sorry, 440 Hemi. Maybe they went for 65, 67. In 10 years, when the boomers were retiring, from the late 90s to like the mid 2000s, the aughts, they were going for $150,000, $160,000.
The ones that didn't sell for $200,000.
Right? Yeah, they peaked
insane.
at $200,000. The Hemi Cudas, they were like $200,000. Yeah. It's crazy.
And that's kind of like sold for like $700,000 as a Hemi Cuda convertible. That was one of two the last year that they made.
Really?
In that color. And it just sold in the last few months for $700,000.
That is just
insane.
That's insane numbers, right? But like you say, that pool of people, right, that was their poster car is shrinking, right? There's people that's kind of aging out and they're like, well, I got the car I wanted, right? My retirement gift to myself, and maybe they put it back in the pool and sell it. And now you got a different group of guys that are coming into those earning years, like you said, those 30s, maybe 40s, 50s, early 60s. They may have a different idea of what that poster car is for them.
It's a funny story. I went out with my dad to look at a car whenever I was in high school. I had not bought my first car yet.
Okay.
I'm 15 or 16 years old. And a guy has a 340 Cuda for sale. This has the shaker hood, the pistol grip.
Oh, yeah. Is it Hurst? What's the pistol grip?
I think it was a Hurst.
Okay.
shifter,
Okay. Either way.
Pistol grip handle.
The pistol grip is so cool.
So I remember it was green with white stingers on it.
Yeah.
And I remember my dad sitting in the passenger seat, me sitting in the driver's seat, and just taking that car for like a 3-mile drive and bringing it back to the guy's house. I wanted it so bad.
You're like, I'm sold.
As we pulled into the driveway, my dad said, "You're not buying.
You're not getting this.
It's just no way. Even though it was my money, I was living at his house, and he's just like, "You're not buying this."
No way.
I want to say it was $600 or $700. But it's just insane because in my brother's car, his Roadrunner that he had, he took it and got it tuned up at a friend of my dad's that did a lot of race cars.
Sure.
My dad's buddy took it out for a ride. He brought it back and he retarded the spark and turned everything down a little bit. It's like
this boy ain't gonna make it.
Faith, let your son take off in his car.
Wow.
That it's just stupid fast, right?
Yeah.
Just nuts. But that car would scare the crap out of you.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. That's super cool.
As you're driving, it wants to float, and as you're turning, it wants to go straight. It's just, the cars today, you know, you think about the cars back in the 60s and 70s, you know, the late 60s, very early 70s, whenever you had a 400 horsepower car, you could outdrive the suspension and tires easily. Because bias ply tires, they had
and braking too.
450 horsepower in a Vet with bias ply tires.
4 drum brakes. Could you imagine? Like, what?
Yeah.
How are you stopping?
Right.
You know? Even my little Volkswagen, I had maybe 100 horsepower. It was like braking optional. No power brakes either. It's like whatever you press, that's what it would try to apply and stopping force.
Well, you use the engine to stop it.
Well, you gear it down. Gear it down. That's what you had to use both.
Right.
I learned you had to use both to get it to stop. There's no sudden stopping. So let's talk about the top 3. Top 3 cars that choose, the ones that probably got away. You say, God, I probably should have held on to that.
Well, I can't say. I had a 65 and a 67 L79 Corvette, right? Both of them with 2 tops. Both of them very, very nice, numbers matching. I can't say that they got away from me, though, because I consciously made a decision to sell them.
You let them go. And one was recently, right? Last couple of years.
I sold a 67 L79 at Mecum last March.
That's right.
So not last month, but last March.
Yeah, last March, 2022.
And did very well on it. I actually made a few bucks. And
awesome.
The guy that bought it lived in Texas, and he came down to my house. I gave him a bunch of spare parts and books and everything.
Awesome.
And he's a car guy, right?
Sure.
So it's great. So it's the perfect sale to the perfect guy.
Yep.
I wish that Mecum didn't get their commission.
I know you're like, I'll go direct with the guy, right?
He paid and I paid.
Yeah,
But anyway, that's what Frank and Dana do, right? They pull together buyers and sellers.
Broker.
And they just had Mecum in Houston 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
And they had a great sale. And they had a lot of really nice no reserve cars sold. But I wouldn't say that that's one that got away. I think that I sold my GTS too soon. I know I sold my R8 Spider too soon. I kept that car for 3 or 4 years, but I would have loved to have kept that car longer.
Sure.
And it turns out, well, I sold the Spider to buy the 360.
It's 360, right?
So I traded in the R8 straight up for that the other way. I'm sorry. I sold the 360 Spider to buy the R8.
To get the R8. Got you.
Straight up. It was less than $5,000 delta between the two cars.
Not a bad deal.
Now, they both have appreciated since then, but I didn't get enough enjoyment out of the R8. I put 5,000 or 6,000 miles on it, and I should have just kept it and drove it a lot more.
Definitely.
But I can't say I had a lot of them get away.
You've enjoyed
I've sold something, it's always been to buy something else, right? So it's always like...
It was time.
Yeah. Close one door, the next one opens, and move into something else. Sometimes it's exactly what you want, and usually it's not exactly what you want.
Never.
Right?
It feels like it. Like we have an itch that can't really be scratched.
I've never bought a car that I've bought that I've absolutely have had so much trouble with it that that I had to sell it. I've never had like a true lemon in my life. Like I've never had a car. I've broke down on the side of the road. I've had to hitchhike home and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But that's rare, right?
It is rare, actually. It is rare.
Right.
It is rare. I think those stories get blown up a little bit too much when you have. I've had cars that I've had what I would call is an undesirable experience, but I still have good memories of the car, right? There's such complex machines. The more complex they get, you gotta have reasonable expectations.
Right.
Like something could go wrong. This is a really, really nice car, and when those things go wrong, you're like, well, yeah, I figured that could go wrong. And that's one of the things, like giving a little advice when I was talking about that cost of ownership, right? I bought this Audi S6.
Awesome car.
Awesome car. It's the V10 generation.
Awesome.
So the 5.2.
Was it a stick?
No, it was an automatic.
They did have some of those S6s with sticks, yeah.
But it was like it's the flappy paddle generation, what they called it. So I thought it was cool. It's like the robotized. It was like almost a manual, right?
Yeah.
A robotized manual. And it had some issues, right? And you couldn't expect it to be maintenance like an A6. And I think other people that say, I just want to get into a luxury car to have a nice car without those expectations, you go to get some serious issues. They handed me a bill. It's like, okay, yeah, okay.
I was in an Audi dealer a long time ago, 15 years ago, whatever, and they started up the S6 to drive it out of the
just crazy
of the showroom for somebody. They sold it, and just listening to it, I was like, oh my God,
I'll take one.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool car. It's a cool car.
That is awesome. I remember I bought a 2011 Camaro SS.
Okay.
And so I drove that car out of Monday Chevrolet on 45, and I drove it to Midas Mufflers. It had 30 miles on it. I took
Get rid of
Midas
those
mufflers. I had him cut the exhaust off. He took the caps and the mufflers, and he took them off and wrapped them in plastic, and he threw it in the back seat. It was a convertible with a top down. It just filled up the back end with my exhaust. Ran straight pipes.
Just test pipes. Yeah.
So it just ran straight pipes. That car was unbelievably loud. But if you grew up loving cars, it's
sounds
you never
perfect.
listen to the radio. It's just my neighbors hated it, but I loved it.
Of course.
It's just too much fun to drive. First generation of the new
like the fifth gen, I think it is, right?
Retro Camaro is just too much fun. It's just a really
they perfected
fun car.
that chassis too. Them and Cadillac, GM, that whole platform. Every car on that platform did really, really well because it's a good platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good.
Had an XLR, which is a Corvette-alac, right? And so it's
I think they're cool, man.
They're really fun. I didn't have the V model, the 400 horsepower.
Was it the North Star? The 32 valve.
V8,
Okay.
And it was that was another. That car was $75,000-$80,000 competing with a $75,000 and $80,000 Mercedes. So Cadillac was not very successful selling them.
No.
And they were basically hand built.
Overhead cam V8 GM, which is a big deal.
With a top that worked great, and the entire chassis and suspension worked great. It had a front engine and a rear transmission.
Yep, it had the mag drive with the torque tube.
Yep. Mag drive was a problem with them.
Yeah,
it was a problem.
Yep.
But technically, it was way ahead of its time. It was just a really cool halo car for GM to build in the early 2000s to compete with Europe.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool. And I had a lot of fun with it.
I'd imagine. So how did you get into the Mecum world? How did you fall into that?
I wouldn't say just Mecum, but I've been to car auctions since my 20s and 30s. I've always enjoyed going to car auctions. I love watching car auctions on TV.
Yeah.
And you talk about the ones that got away. You think about the cars you've seen sold at auctions over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Some of them are just crazy good deals.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're going to the auction just for the entertainment value of it.
Sure.
You're not buying anything. You're not selling anything. You might have a bidder's paddle because you've got $10,000 if something really good comes up. Because you just don't have the money.
To, right? Yeah.
Usually, like I wanted to buy a specific car a couple of years ago at Mecum, and I had a $100,000 limit on it. It was a Intermechanica is what it was. It was an Intermechanica Spider.
Really?
Like an Italian Spider.
And they were running one? I mean, you knew one that was going to be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I went there specifically because I wanted to bid and buy this car.
Sure.
I had a $100,000 budget. I think Haggerty Concourse condition was $115,000. This was a really nice car.
Okay.
I thought I'd be
competitive. You're competitive.
Like the third bid blew me out of the water. I was just
really
ran. I can't remember what it sold for, $140,000 or something like that. But super cool car, right?
Yeah.
But you go to auctions
Super rare,
and
too.
you see cars that you just don't see anywhere else, right?
That's right.
Especially in the West Coast, right? And
Yeah.
You go to West Coast and you see cars that you won't see. Meekum kind of specializes in muscle cars and Corvettes
feels like
and
yeah.
Chevelles and Novas
Right.
and things like that. That's kind of their specialty. You get to Barrett Jackson and you might see some European cars that are just spectacular.
Yeah.
You know, these old 60s Ferraris and old McLarens and old Lamborghini Countaches and Diablos and just super cool cars. So even if you just see it, I went to the LPGA Chevron golf tournament, and there's a Bugatti sitting there right at the entrance. You know?
way.
Yeah, it's just a super cool car, right?
It
don't
is.
see a lot of Bugattis.
No.
Yeah.
Out in the wild, as it were, right?
Out in the wild.
No. So what do you have in the garage right now? Because I know you move through cars pretty swiftly
right now.
Really?
So I have I'm driving a Ford Lightning.
Yes, the current generation all-electric.
The brand new all-electric Lightning, which is a super fun truck. I've got 5,000 miles on it. It's been everything that I was hoping it would be. It's fast. It's good off-road. It hauls stuff. It has a 14 cubic foot front trunk that's weatherproof. It's just a really nice truck, and it's exceptionally well done. And you got to give Ford credit for being an early adopter and getting that truck out ahead of everybody else. They got it out pretty
fast, right?
Yeah.
They beat everybody to the punch on the pickup truck, mainstream.
Absolutely. I sat there on Ford's website the night that they came out with them, right? And so I just clicked and it was like
the refresh button. Let's go.
A concert ticket.
That's right. Ticketmaster, right?
Gave him my $100 and literally got in in the first hour of the confirmation numbers.
That's super cool.
I had the first one I ever saw.
Okay.
And you don't see very many of them still.
Not yet. No.
But, I can't say enough about it. I can't say enough about how good the platform is, how fast it is, how safe it seems to be. It's four-wheel independent suspension. Mm-hmm. It's got 1,500 pounds of battery riding down around the wheels. It handles like
so
no
center
other truck
I've
ever been in. I've owned 10 pickup trucks. I've never had a pickup truck that drives like that. You know, you go 80, 90, 95 miles an hour, and it's just smooth. People can't believe how well it drives. And then I have a Mercedes SUV.
Okay.
And then I have a 23 King Ranch Ford Super Duty Tremor that I put an order in on back in January, and that's what I'm waiting for. They call it Job 2. Yeah. They're just starting to make them. They started the new 23s they made all the way up to the Lariats as Job 1, and then they saved the King Ranch and the Platinum.
That's right.
In the Limited for Job 2.
That's right.
So they started building the Job 2s now, and I don't know if they've delivered any yet, but I'm expecting to get that sometime this summer.
I would say the next couple months.
I would hope to have it by July, August.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
And I've never had a 2,500, or I've never had a
three-quarter ton, right?
Right. I've never had the F-250.
I love
and
it.
So for towing and off-road, I think it's going to be a pretty nice vehicle.
And you'll have both at the same time. You'll have the Lightning and a 250. Oh, my God. What a garage.
One that can take me for a distance and the other one that's great for 200 miles.
Yeah.
Around the house.
200 miles in a 0 to 60 under 4 seconds.
Right
at 4 seconds.
Right at 4 seconds, yeah.
That just sounds insane for a pickup truck. There's some fast pickup trucks out there, obviously, but something that's right off the dealership lot that's under warranty.
Right.
Doing 4 seconds and practical, too.
It's never been back to the dealer. In fact, I talked to you briefly before this.
Yeah.
It's actually going to go to the dealer on my way home from here for its first time back at 5,000 miles.
And I think that's normal, especially when you buy. That's one thing I was talking about, reasonable expectations when you buy cars. Those first run of vehicles, you got to expect something, right? Mm-hmm. They always have something. And the dealerships are good at, the OEMs are good at fixing it, figuring out what it is. Right. They see you got a handful of them, like, all right, here's the fix for it, right? So that's an awesome story. One of the things I've been asking guests, and I want to ask you, is 2 questions. One, it's a trick question for you because you've had some pretty nice stuff. But if you had no budget, no limitation, what is your dream garage? And it could be what you have right now. We had a person on it was what they had right now because they don't really have a budget. But what would it be for you?
I would put the F430 stick in that garage. I would put that as one of the 3. I would put a Galinda wagon. I'd put a a big Mercedes
okay
GL 550 in there, which is just an unbelievably capable car.
Yes.
You got to think, what are you going to do with this? You got to have something that's going to be kind of a fun car. And then, and then I'd put a 67 Corvette L79, which is the
back to the beginning,
the small block, 350 horsepower, 327. Drives completely different than a big block. I don't think you could find a better balance, more fun car than that.
So autocross it.
I've never owned the big Mercedes, but the other two I've had variants of.
That's awesome.
I can't imagine any better cars than that.
That's a good garage. You got your modern classic with the F430. You got the classic. I mean, which I think the 65, I may be going too far, 66 to 70 Corvette, Camaro, all of them are like halo cars, right? They're always going to be amazing cars. And like you said, the Glenda wagon, a big G5. I like the G63s. The GL, even the GLs too. The GLs, like the SUV, not necessarily. The G63s are cool cars. They're just expensive.
They're too expensive.
Yeah, they pay too much. That's a tax on those guys. Like, give me the GL. It's just as cool.
I'll bet you can find GL 63s that have never been in the mud, never been off road, never been in 4-wheel drive. They're just Beverly Hills and River Oaks
literally
cars that have never been off road. But the problem is that you find one 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's still going to hold its value.
It will.
They do an incredible job of maintaining their value.
Yeah, they do.
So you talk about the depreciation curve. Like depreciation curve on an Aston Martin or a Jag or something.
Or a Maserati.
Or Maserati even. Yeah. You could buy a Maserati for less than 50% of its original sticker price, 4 years old.
Yep.
But that G-Wagon, not so much.
No.
Right?
No, they hold their value. That's why they are so expensive.
The 23 Range Rovers, the big full-body Range Rovers, they're selling for $250,000. $150,000 car selling for $250,000. So it's going to be a long time before they depreciate back to their sticker price.
To the sticker.
Right? Think about that. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
They're phenomenal cars.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. One of the best off-road cars, despite some of the maintenance and the issues that they have. Probably one of the best luxury SUVs for off-road.
Right.
But again, another one that's probably never going to be taken off-road, generally speaking.
Well, no, I had a Defender, and I would air the tires down.
Well, the Defender people tend to use them.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, people that buy a Defender buy it for purpose.
I had a full-size Range Rover that I would take off-road as well, and the same thing. You know, you take it out, you raise the air suspension all the way up, and you have an incredible amount of clearance.
Sure.
And I never got that stuck, and I took it in some really bad stuff. I found it amazing, just absolutely amazing.
All right, next question. If you had a budget, like many people do, right? What right now or something coming down the road could again be in the garage, $50,000 price cap, max of $50,000. What would you buy? What would it be? Single car.
A single car.
Yep. Whatever. It could be car, SUV, pickup, whatever it is. But $50,000.
$50,000 really puts a
because
on it.
I'm gonna tell you, 99% of people out here, that's what they're shopping for.
Right.
We're in a different world.
I would think that I would buy a $50,000 Jeep Wrangler, and
I like it.
Yeah, and
I like it.
You'd still put a 6-speed in it.
Yeah.
Get the 6-cylinder. You can get a pretty well loaded, brand new 2023.
Probably get a Renegade. Yeah, you can
get it. No, Wrangler. You'll get the new. Is it JK or JL? But you'll get the new. You know, you'll get what you want. You might not get it. You won't get a Rubicon.
Rubicon you can't touch.
You'll get a lot of Jeep for $50,000 and have a lot of fun with it and have a lot of ability to take it on a 1,000-mile trip or take it off road or take it to the grocery store or do almost anything with it. Right?
I'm impressed with you, Jeff. That's why I'll have this wry smile. That's a good pick because you can tinker on it. It has the heritage. It has a coolness factor. It can be practical. Gas mileage, whatever. But it can be practical. Low maintenance. Yeah. Inexpensive cost of ownership.
Everybody wants to modify them and make them theirs. Right. Some cars, whenever you modify them, they
huge aftermarket.
Oh, it's incredible. And there's a tremendous
that's a good pick.
Jeep owner groups and a lot of
they have their own wave.
A lot of pride. Yeah.
They have their own wave.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to make a Hall of Fame of the $50,000 pick, and there was a person that came up with this. I
thought about that.
That recently. Is as I'm thinking as you're kind of talking about it. We've only had 2 of these so far. That's got to be up there. You're right. That's a good pick. because it checks all of the boxes for even people like us that love tinkering, modifying, coolness factor, right? The aftermarket, the ecosystem around it, right? Like how are the people that own this when I go to a car meet or you go to auctions, or, you know?
It's always cool to have
Excellent
a Jeep.
pick.
I don't care.
That is
Jeeps are always cool. And I had a 16 Rubicon, and it was just an awesome vehicle.
Yeah.
A lot of fun with this six-cylinder stick.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, you really can't.
Can't go wrong.
Too much fun.
And they hold their value too. They don't really crater. They kind of plateau. They lose value and they just plateau.
I would put the new Bronco probably in that same thing. So I had a 21 Bronco with a soft top.
Yes.
And I had a 22 Bronco with a hard top. So the modular hard top.
Which one would you prefer?
Well, the 21 had a 4-cylinder automatic in it.
Sure.
And then the 22 had the 6-cylinder higher option. It was a completely different vehicle. The 22 was much nicer.
Sure.
And then I did things like put tires on it, put lights on it, and all that kind of stuff because I can't resist. All the fun stuff. Yeah. So whenever you come down to and I've been to Bronco off-road schools where they actually work with you on. It's out in Marble Falls, Texas.
Sure.
And so you're driving it off-road, driving it through water, driving it straight up and down stone walls.
Yeah.
So I'd put the Bronco and the Jeep pretty close together, but I think that if I was only going to buy one, I'd buy the Jeep.
The Jeep.
Yeah,
the Jeep. I think the Bronco is so awesome. It has the lineage and the heritage too. It's really, really cool, but there's so many Jeeps out here. Like you said, that community is a cool community too.
And there's a great Bronco owners community as
well. Is it really?
Yeah.
I can imagine that.
Yeah,
I can imagine that. It's starting, right? It's newer, but
they have clubs that are meeting on weekends and going off-roading together and everything. It's a lot of fun.
That's super cool. Jeff, I appreciate you for coming on, man.
Are we done? That
just flew by, right?
I haven't even looked at a clock.
That's what I love about this. I love you. The people, you can tell the people that love cars like myself, I could talk about cars all day.
You go to a car show, you can meet 10 different people from completely different backgrounds, but you all have a common interest, and that's the cars. You know,
I could not sum this show up better. Everybody, if you didn't figure it out yet, that's what this is about.
It binds people together.
We're all different, but we're more alike than we think we are, right? When you start to talk to people, like especially in the car community, I've seen people from, people that I would say that aren't well off, they wouldn't be described as well off, and people that are doing very, very, very well, and they share the same passion.
Absolutely.
They share the same passion. You got a guy standing next to his Bugatti I met not too long ago. We talked for 30 minutes, and I didn't know he owned the car.
Nice.
He was talking about my BMW. I couldn't believe it. He was like, he was pouring over the car, and then he's like, you know what? Give me your number. We exchanged numbers. He's like, I got to get it out of here. I have some things going on. And he walks over to Bugatti. I'm like, what? What are we talking about? Why are we talking about this wreck? Coolest guy I ever met.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's how it works, though. That's how it works in the car community, man. We all have that common passion. We love cars. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you coming on. This is not the last time Jeff is going to be on, because Jeff can talk about cars. There's more to his story, and he has some stuff that's coming. I think he doesn't even know it yet. I'm sure there's some new stuff that'll be on the horizon in the next couple of years.
Right.
I appreciate you, man. Hey, guys, couple programming notes. As you know, this is going to be on all of your podcasting platforms. So if you're a first-time listener, thank you. Review and rank the podcast. We'll have this up on YouTube. We'll give you a video version. And hope you guys are enjoying this content. If you are, share it with people. Like, you'd be surprised the people that aren't car people that I'm getting feedback from. Like, I don't know anything about cars, but I love hearing your show. So give it a chance, forward it to your family, and see what they think about it. And we appreciate it. Everybody that gives us support, we love it. And we look forward to coming in the next episode. We have some interesting guests coming up for you, just like Jeff. So we'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.